I'm AlexofAllTrades, and this is the Spooky Sunday Book Circle for Salem's Lot by Stephen King in honor of Halloween. This is the second Stephen King novel in this series and his actual second novel. It is about a small town in Maine being overrun with vampires as a novelist visits for the first time since he was a child in the hopes of writing a new novel about the creepy house on the hill. Frankly, I felt Salem's Lot was skippable. It feels mired in many sophomoric issues of writing. Some of the characters feel unreal or too much like an author insert. The way in which characters became connected felt forced. Some of the prose is too purple, and there are really too many characters. Interestingly, just fuck that word entirely. I did read the deleted scenes, which were earlier versions of moments in the published novel, so I could make some comparisons. When I said some of the characters felt unreal, I'm actually talking about Mark, the kid. Throughout most of the book, he is so unrealistically calm and conniving, especially for a 9-year-old. I'm not saying that there aren't 9-year-olds like this, but they are very common in fiction, so as to create non-annoying children that work successfully in the plot. I've already started The Shining, and Danny is like this too at 5 years old. I have a feeling, though, that writers also do this because we, that is, writers, are unusual children. I'll admit to being more adult-like as a child than is typical, so maybe King was too. It just makes for children that are all the same in narratives. The author insert character is obviously Ben Mears, the hero, who is literally a writer of novels. Besides that, it's not clear if he is anything like King was when he wrote Salem's Lot. But I'm sure most people can see a novelist in a novel and think author insert. But really, any kind of creative type is usually an author insert. Painters, dancers, actors, other types of writers. They're almost all the author, but also one could argue that every character is the writer unless they admit that some other real person is being depicted. It just depends on to what degree the author is willing to go in inserting themselves. The way in which Susan and Ben meet felt forced. The narrative even suggests a sense of destiny between them, which to me felt like an easy way of justifying their love. The same was true with the connection between Ben and Matt. They got so chummy, so quickly, to the point when Matt has to deal with a life and death situation, the first person he calls is Ben, whom he's had dinner with once. It felt weird and contrived. Some of these could be chalked up to influences from Dracula. Lucy doesn't have 3 suitors because she's a slut. Women who die virgins are not sluts, but because Stoker needed a psychiatrist, a lord, and an accomplished hunter to be in the narrative to take out Dracula. Best way to get them in there is have them be connected to a victim, and a rich heiress having 3 suitors was perfectly normal for the time. Lucy's statement that she wished she could take 3 husbands wasn't sexual, but came out of her sense of caring for each of the men. This technique to get the 3 men involved in the plot works adequately in Dracula, but seeing as that book is over 100 years old, it can't be held to the same standards of technique as something that came out in the last 50 years. I'm not a fan of this technique though, but mostly I don't like its use in Salem's Lot because it feels too clunky. The suspension of disbelief only goes so far to allow for vampires, not to encompass a sense of fate that overshadows character motivation and typical human interaction. I also often felt bored with the descriptions, especially of the season changing. There was nothing held back in those sections poetically, and it didn't really add to the plot or any thematic idea. Some of these descriptions went through the many people of the town. Salem's Lot, the town, may be small, but it still has a cast of hundreds, and I had a hard time remembering each character once they were brought up again. The town itself is a character, and I often got tired of the long sections of descriptions of all the people starting their day or going to bed or whatever. What I did like of these moments was how quickly the problem spread, like a kind of epidemic. That was perfectly depicted without any overtness to it. But even the main characters got confusing. Those names, those oh so typical names, Ben, Matt, Mark, Jimmy. Then there are all the people with B names, Barlow, Ben, and extending into the extra shorts at the end of my edition, Booth, Bones, and Boone. Then there's those with M names, Matt, Mark, Mike. Some variety would have made it a little easier. So now I'm going to talk spoilers, so skip ahead to avoid those. First of all, with the extra stories, One More for the Road and Jerusalem's Lot, it felt like there was the trope of horror stories, especially seen in movies, never concluding. By the end, Ben and Mark are burning down the lot, and are planning to stick around to kill those vampires who are left alive. But in One More for the Road, the lot has been burned down for years, but the vampires are still around. What the hell happened to Ben and Mark? It is a conclusion that Ben and Mark are going to take care of those vampires that survive, but that conclusion is undone by One More for the Road. The same thing happens in Jerusalem's Lot, the short story. The lot is abandoned, somehow, but Charles is now there and the evil is coming back, but after the conclusion of his story, it turns out someone else can take Charles' place. Just end the narrative! It also brings up questions of how the lot was refounded to become the town of the novel. Ugh. It wasn't until after writing much of this script that I learned that Stephen King has a reputation for bad endings that I'd never heard before. Of his novels that I've read, really so far only this one has a bad ending, but I have a lot of work to catch up on to see how often that theory holds true. Considering how large of a bibliography he has, I'm sure it's more of a give and take. When one writes as much as he does, there are bound to be a few bad apples in the bunch. That's the price of superstardom and a prolific writing career. So, the deleted scenes. One of them, I definitely agree, should have been cut. The extended discussion on writing between Ben and Susan. Not a good idea. So indulgent. However, the scene wherein Dud turns the high school girl in her bedroom, while unsavory, gives an idea of what Dunn was doing after being turned and how she was turned. A rewrite could have fixed the unsavory quality of it. Frankly though, its disturbing nature was pornographic to me, so I would have been fine with it as it was. It fits with the long-standing theme that vampirism is the horror version of rape. The other scene that I felt was better than the version in the printed novel was Jimmy Cody's death. In the printed novel, he falls off the basement steps on two knives pointed upwards and bleeds to death. However, the scene itself is confusing and unclear. We do not hear exactly what killed Jimmy until later, and how Mark got out is unclear as well. I still don't understand how he did. And it's not as if the scene didn't try to explain it. I've noticed that explaining the mechanics of action is often one of the hardest tasks for a writer to accomplish well. A reader saying, "I wasn't able to picture it," is the death knell of a scene. And sometimes it just doesn't get solved. That's why they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. The prose states in that scene, "Then the screams began," which sounded to me like multiple people were screaming and didn't really have the effect of horrifying me, as it was too vague and tropic. The original way in which he dies is very well described, horrific, and amazing. I felt it hard. And bear in mind, I was reading it completely isolated from the rest of the novel. Maybe it was too much for some people. I could see the published narrative working if the scene was described in more detail. As an effective means to disturb the reader, though, as it stands, it's not as good as King's original version. Ben's grief over his wife Miranda is a major topic in the first half of the book that just disappears once the killing really starts. The problem I have with this is that so much space is dedicated to it, and then Susan dies, and Ben doesn't even connect the two. There's really no focus on the idea that Ben has loved and lost twice, both to violent ends, and it's not a thought nor a subtextual bent while Susan is being killed. It's really annoying because it was very much an unmined theme, sitting right there unexplored, which suggests that Miranda's death was very much just character development for Ben, as if Miranda's death was just something that popped into the narrative as it was being written, a chance occurrence that was then forgotten. I'm not even going to touch the argument that she was fridged, because men do lose their female loves in the real world, and dealing with that tragedy is a real thing. But here, it is just not utilized enough for my liking. Would I suggest Salem's Lot? That I'm not sure of. I could name better Stephen King novels, though I'm not sure if I could name better vampire novels. Most aren't very good. I've not found a single one that I've truly loved, that I rushed to finish, including Interview with a Vampire, which I keep getting about 100 pages into, and then getting bored with it, and reading other things instead. What did you think of Salem's Lot? Did you feel the sense of fate worked? Did you have a hard time with the cast of characters? Did you like the prose? If you got a chance, what did you think of the deleted scenes and the short stories One More for the Road and Jerusalem's Lot? Do you have a vampire novel you think I'd like better? Let me know in the comments below, but please mark all spoilers. Would you like to see what I'm currently reading? Follow me on goodreads.com/AlexofAllTrades to see what I'm reading right now and what book reviews you can expect in the future. I've made a Discord. I'm on it all the time and you're all invited to chat with me. There are channels for video games, movies, TV shows, books, and writing. Even a place for you to promote your own things. Join me there. Everyone is welcome. This has been the Sunday Book Circle, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, subscribe, click that bell, leave a comment below, visit my blog at empatheticwriter.wordpress.com, and follow me on Patreon for exclusive content and a shout out on a video. Merch, 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 merch. Yeah. Check out my new shop at cafepress.com/AlexofAllTrades for all kinds of products with my face on them.